And we're live. And I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is we're live. The bad news is that I do not have a proper microphone with me, or rather, I do, but I don't have the little adapter that lets me plug it into my computer. And so I may have bad sound today. And that's the bad news. Uh, it is the 1st of October, Wednesday, the eve of Yom Kippur. It is 8 o'clock a.m. And I am coming to you from the National Press Club, where at precisely 9 o'clock, um, uh, we are going to be having our event for, I'm going to try to make myself a little bit less fuzzy, cleaning the camera. Does that help? Um, and for the launch of our um, uh, Security by Design project. Um, and so I'm going to have to knock off about 5 to 10 minutes early today. Um, as for people who are making jokes about fuzziness and cleaning the bandwidth and the bandwidth, yeah, I am running off my phone right now, and it is the magic of technology that in a situation like this, where I have nothing but a laptop and a phone and some cables, I can nonetheless fulfill my commitment to you all. And then you guys can whine about the resolution. And that is the world we live in, and I love it. We are going to be joined later in the hour by the most excellent Minna Ålander. But before we do, uh, I'm going to vamp. And for those who are just joining and asking, I am at the National Press Club with its wood paneling and festooned with cool old newspaper um, uh, front pages. I'm sitting in front of the Franklin is Roosevelt dead New York Times page. And the National Press Club is one of the cool institutions of Washington, where organizations, rent rooms or just, use rooms to hold press conferences, hold release events for, in this case, a paper, um, and um, uh, and a lot of out of town journalists. It's mostly out of town journalists who are kind of members of the club, and it's a kind of good place to hang out. People file stories from here. It's a kind of a neat institution, and very useful as a public service to the press and to organizations that want to interface with the press. Lawfare is, of course, both. We are both a news organization, but in this case, we are a research organization that produced a whole bunch of papers on how to design better hardware and software, and what the sort of principles of security, integrating security in design elements are. And so we are releasing the all those papers have been released, but we are releasing the final report of this project at 9 o'clock, and it is a mark of the great growth of Lawfare as an institution that I don't even have a speaking role. And I could not be prouder of that my team on the Security by Design project, led by Paul Rosenzweig and Justin Sherman, and by Eugenia Lostri until she left us and went to work for Google, um, uh, just ran this project, and I did some distant management, but I am not a significant player in this, and that makes me extremely happy that we do a lot of work now that I am uh, um, not participating in, well, not participating in, but not personally leading. Kate, why don't you come on and rant about Lisa Monaco and Mike and Microsoft? Since uh, Kate seems to want somebody to rant on the subject, I suggest she do it herself. I have thoughts on the subject, but I actually would love to hear yours first. Um, so anyway, we are going to wrap about 10 minutes early so that I have time to get a to get my bearings and find a seat and the like. Ah, Kate is calling in, I suspect, with a rant. Kate, do you have a rant for us?
I just I don't think this has gotten that much attention, but I guess Trump had re indicated that he wants I guess Microsoft just hired Lisa Monaco, who used to be really high up in the DOJ. I forget all the
She was
what
Deputy Attorney General.
Deputy Attorney General. Okay. She was Deputy Attorney General during.
And just for those who don't know, the Deputy Attorney General is the person who runs the Justice Department. The Attorney General is a decision maker, but the DAG's office is the operational nerve center of the Justice Department.
And that was during Obama's administration, right?
No, 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 no. She was in the White House in the NSC during the Obama
Oh,
administration.
okay.
She was DAG during the
Oh,
past
during
the
Biden.
outgoing
Okay.
administration.
Because I guess I knew her mostly during, and I didn't know her, but I interacted more with her during Obama. Um, anyway, Microsoft hired her to be a high level position. She's very qualified. She's very smart, bright. I mean, I'm sure she'd do good. I don't even know what the position was, but Trump came out and
Just sort of like the
demanded that.
global head of public policy.
Gotcha. Thank you. See, I don't even know the details. I just wanted you to rant on it because you have probably more information. But Trump came out and said that he's demanding that Microsoft fire her. And once again, I don't understand. I mean, I know there's just so much shit flooding the zone, but there's just so much to take in and so much egregious behavior that I don't know. I
But
don't.
you haven't heard that Microsoft has actually taken any action,
No,
right?
no, no, no. But
Yeah.
just the
So,
fact that, yeah,
right. So it is completely outrageous. And so Lisa is a friend and somebody who, not we're not particularly close, but we know each other and we're, friendly and I think very highly of her. Um, she's it is completely outrageous that the administration would do this. Um, I have kept quiet about it, not because it's not outrageous, but because the more we gin
attention.
up hey, this is terrible, the more dug in he gets, and the less of a chance that it will quietly blow over and uh, she will go on with her job.
Yeah,
I think the point at which there's any sign that Microsoft is taking this seriously, and that's a point at which we should all start ranting about it. But, Trump tweets all kinds of things, demanding all kinds of things of all kinds of different entities and people. And I'm not like the fact that he has a bee in his bonnet about Lisa Monaco is in and of itself doesn't separate her from, you know, I don't know, the head of Intel, right? Who's firing. He also demanded before then. Um, uh, and so, I don't want to pretend it's anything other than an outrageous abuse. But with these guys, you have to distinguish between the outrageous abuses that do and don't have immediate consequences. And I think in this case, we can still reasonably hope that it is actually completely inconsequential. But I agree with you, the moment it's looked like something other than Uncle Ranty, ranting, it's something that we have to think about, and it's part of his long-term campaign of retaliation against everybody involved in the. I mean, I'm sure his hatred of Lisa comes from the Mar-a-Lago raid and subsequent
Well, I think
indictment.
it had to do with Laura Loomer, actually. I think Laura
I'm
Loomer
sorry?
brought it to his attention.
Well, that's never a good sign
I
because
know. That's why.
she really does have influence. And look, I mean, you know, um, there is nothing to say about it other than that it is disgusting and outrageous. And if anybody else did it, it would be a story for a week and there would be congressional hearings.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, I will say that I hope it's a passing thing, and I hope that Microsoft, treats it with the deference it deserves, which is that they should take it into the bathroom and wipe their asses with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Kara Swisher
that
mentioned
said,
it on her podcast too. And she kind of threatened um Nadella, is that his name? I can't. It's one of those things where I read all these names and I kind of, elide them. But she kind of said, if he does fire her, she will go after Microsoft with all of her, reporting. I don't want to say power. She wasn't being arrogant about it, but she said that she will just rake them over the coals.
right.
But
Well, look, I mean, um, look, whether it develops into anything is a separate question from how outrageous it is. It is
right.
super outrageous. And and the idea that you can't go into government, serve honorably, and then leave government, take a job at a
Yeah.
tech company, a law firm, or something else without the successor administration coming after that organization is terrible and destructive. And, that goes well beyond Lisa.
Well, it's also funny because when you said that you didn't want to talk about it, it kind of reminds me a lot of times I just maybe I don't know the balance between just not covering any of his crazy shit because all he wants is attention. So what if we just didn't cover him? I mean, what if I mean I guess it's impossible because news needs ratings, but I just kind of wish for one day we wouldn't cover his crazy shit.
Right, but of
But
course
that
there's a tension there between not covering it and then if you don't cover it, you normalize it
right. And then
because right, and so it's kind of a lose-lose situation.
yeah.
Um,
And then the
uh,
boxes and the Newsmax will cover it and fawn all over him and blah blah blah. So he'll get attention either way.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, all of which,
Thanks.
uh, thank you, Kate. Um, uh, uh, pulled me away from my introduction. I have not yet said the sun is shining, which it is. I have not yet said that the birds are chirping, which they are. And I have not yet said that it's going to be a great fucking day, which it is, whether you are at home or in the National Press Club or still in bed. Um, and uh, you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a goddamn revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that I will do this show from wherever I happen to be at 8 o'clock in the morning in whatever time zone I happen to be, though there will not be a show tomorrow because tomorrow is Yom Kippur. So there will not be a show tomorrow. And I know some of you are going to show up expecting a show, but at 8 o'clock tomorrow, there will not be a show. And another one of the revolutionary features, of which there are many, is that sometimes I have to cut the show a few minutes short to get to a lawfare event. Um, and today is one of those days, all of which is a long-winded way of saying that we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to have a show from the National Press Club, ever so slightly abbreviated, with beginning with a rant from Kate and proceeding on to a conversation with the very estimable Minna Ålander. Um, and which will begin as soon as the very estimable Minna Ålander shows up. Until then, folks, the phones are open. We got to have a better line for that. Phones are open. That really makes it sound like talk radio. Um, uh, the the bring me on, I don't know what the button says, the ask to talk button. Somebody tell me what that uh, request live call in, John Hawkinson says. The request live call in button is gleaming. It's demanding your attention. The chat is bristling, and uh, the only thing that's missing is you. Um, and we have 33 people on the show, which, yesterday we did better. Yesterday we had 42 or something at one point. Um, Carol says she's busy eating a peach, which answers one of the key questions uh, in T.S. Eliot's proof rock poem, Do I Dare to Eat a Peach? Which, if you're Carol T., the answer apparently is yes. Nicholas has shown up, but is a black rectangle, and Riverside informs me that there is something wrong on Nicholas's. Can I hear you, Nicholas? Apparently not. Um, okay, we're gonna uh, uh, and I am unable to dismiss Nicholas as well. So um, we're gonna have the ghost of Nicholas there, just doing his thing. Um, all right. Well, somebody asked me to talk about the Hegseth speech yesterday, and I will just say I didn't watch it. Because the Hegseth speech involved a crazed display of one of my least favorite things, which is hyper compensating masculinity. And I have such contempt for that sort of thing that I just can't even watch it. And uh, uh, I don't, displays of masculinity just really aren't my thing. And so when we have a Secretary of Defense who calls in all the generals to tell them that they're fat, and called in all the generals to tell them that they need to stick with normal gender norms and that sort of thing. This does not interest me. And so I am badly positioned to talk about the Hegseth speech because because uh, um, I just didn't watch it. Now, Albert Craig raises a very significant issue, which is this position consistent with my desire to fight Putin? And let us say, first of all, Putin has missed his chance. If you've seen him recently, he is past the age and past the physical conditioning in which he would be able to even contemplate a fight with me. They're not making videos of him doing feats of prowess anymore. I don't know what his underlying condition is, but he's not in a position to fight me anymore. I'm still willing to do it anytime, but it's past the point. Um, However, I do want to say that back when this was more of a live issue, when there was a real chance that, I was going to get to fight Putin, no, it was not inconsistent at all. And here is why. Um, my point was to make fun of Putin's hyper aggressive displays of masculinity, not to do them myself. You didn't see me riding around on a horse bare chested or carrying a tiger cub or, throwing people in judo displays. There wasn't an apparatus around me trying to explain to the world that I was the most manly person in the history of the world. I believe in that article I described myself as a middle-aged desk worker. And by the way, I still am a middle-aged desk worker. I have not left the desk since then. So I don't want to, my point was people should stop falling for his displays of toxic masculinity, and I know how to make fun of it. I'll challenge him to a fight. So there is no inconsistency whatsoever, all of which brings us to the subject of Swedish blueberry soup, which I feel like should wait for Minna Ålander, who will be calling in from Sweden. But Joel, what's on your mind?
Blueberry soup. So really, it's pretty simple. I just, I'm a simple guy. I wake up, blueberry soup. So anyway, a good friend of mine, Swedish guy, that we know through the Swedish Institute here in Minneapolis. Last time we had him over for dinner, he brought me some blueberry soup package. So I'm going to try to make the his family favorite blueberry soup here. And hang on, grab the camera. So far we've got sort of that. That is a combination of water, some oat milk, and a tiny bit of orange juice to give it a little acidity, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make blueberry soup ice cream. And this is what my morning is until a little later. Then I've got mountain bike lessons tonight, and we're going to go over riding off drops, which is like a platform, then you have to drop off of it. So I'm doing that this afternoon.
But I have a serious question about blueberry soup.
Yes, sir.
How sweet is blueberry soup?
Pretty darn sweet. And here in Minnesota, in Mora, Minnesota, we have our version of the Vasaloppet, which is a race in Sweden. It's a 90-kilometer cross-country skiing race, and it is traditional here that they serve that at the end as a recovery food stuff. Because it's got lots of carbohydrates in it, and your body's kind of a little low on those at the moment. And so they give you a big bowl of blueberry soup, and Bob's your uncle. You're in business.
So just to be clear, the blueberry soup, you are mixing it with like an ice cream base, and then you're going
sort of a combination, halfway between sort of a sorbet and an ice cream. I didn't want to get it too ice creamy because then it wouldn't be blueberry soupy. It's an experiment, and we're going to try it. I'm going to start whisking as we discuss here.
I got a serious question for you. What makes the ice cream blueberry soup ice cream rather than just blueberry ice cream?
See, these are fine questions that we are getting to the bottom of, sir. We're going to find out that exact. I'll have the answer to that question. Ooh, it really thickened up quick.
Because I can see, I really can see the argument that it's soup because you serve it as soup. Otherwise, it's just blueberries. And if you put it in ice
blueberry
cream,
gook. Yeah, it's sort of blueberry gook, and then you can kind of take it several ways. That's kind of what I was thinking. So, and it really gelatined us up here. I'm gonna give you another look here. So she really kind of jellied up on me. I think I have to add a little water. That's gonna be some pretty sticky ice cream. Oh, it's fogging up. Sorry. So anyway, that's what I'm up to this morning. Then I got to go practice my teaching of jumping off of things on a mountain bike later.
Well, don't get hurt, because I just learned relatively recently that an old college friend of mine had been killed in a mountain biking accident.
Good heavens!
Yeah, it was most unpleasant. It was a little while ago, but it stuck with me.
Did he get hit by a car or something, or did he just go down in the woods? Or
sorry, no, I think it was a fall going down the mountain, but I'm not sure. So stay safe and wear all the protective gear and don't hurt your neck.
Yep. Yeah, for sure, right? Gotta keep that attached if I can.
We need an update on the blueberry soup ice cream, and specifically on the question of, does it come out tasting like blueberry soup or just like blueberries? As in, is it different from just blueberry ice cream?
Yeah, once she's done, we'll grind one up because I have this. I have kind of one of those things you grind it instead of churning it. We'll grind one up and do a taste test.
All right. That's excellent. We will
Cool.
see you on Friday, Joel.
We'll see ya.
All right. We now have the important question facing the community, which is, are we being stood up by Minna Ålander? Um, we're not sure. I'm not saying the answer is yes. I'm not saying the answer is no. I'm just saying we're beginning to reach the point where we have to ask this question. Now, I will say that if in fact we are being stood up by Minna Ålander, that would be my just desserts because recently I was slated to have lunch with a very distinguished Washington lawyer, and it was at my request because he works on important democracy issues, and I thought we should get to know each other. And I sent him a note to that effect, and he agreed, and he made a reservation, and I stood him up. And I stood him up because it somehow just never made it onto my calendar. And I couldn't be more embarrassed about it. And I am a person who is almost never late to anything, as you will notice from, the promptness with which this show starts. Um, uh, and yet, I stood him up and I felt terrible about it, and we rescheduled for today. And so if there is somebody stands me up today, it will only be the karmic reality that I have earned. Carol P. finished her peach, which she dared to eat, and is calling in. How was your peach? Was it worth the boldness that it took to eat it?
They always are, yes. And this is the tail end of beach season. This might be my last week to have them, and so there was a no-brainer. But I wanted to say, you said that you didn't see Hegseth's speech. I think I managed 5 or 10 minutes before I had to just shut it off, and it was I really couldn't help wondering what the uh, generals and everybody were thinking about or feeling about when Hegseth lectured them on the warrior ethos and
Lectured them on what?
on how the warrior ethos and
Hmm.
how important it was to be ready and strong and everything. And a lot of these people have been working on that since he was a toddler, right?
Well, yes, I mean, probably not literally, but given the average retirement age and the senior ranks of the military, but certainly, uh, look, Hegseth's record
Well,
is
you can't. Okay, but
Hegseth's record in the military is was not all that long. He's a young man. I mean, he apparently did serve, with some distinction, but it was at a warfighter level, he was not a senior officer. So, he kind of, I haven't actually looked whether there's anybody who's ever served as Secretary of Defense who has less qualification to do it than Hegseth. There may be, but there aren't a lot of them. And certainly not in the modern era when the Defense Department, there were periods when the Defense Department was the War Department and we didn't really do any fighting except, skirmishes with tribal nations. But in the modern era, really post World War II, the Defense Department is a behemoth, and managing it is a real. I mean, it's one of the most complicated organizations in the world, and it has um, uh, bases all over the place. It has, I mean, you want to see, they used to say the sun never set on the British Empire. It really never sets on the U.S. military. And you know, that's a hard job. And the amount of experience that the average person who has it is drawing on of one sort or another is extraordinary. And this is a guy who is, you know, completely out of his depth. And it shows every time he opens his mouth, but it never shows more painfully than when, as you say, he is lecturing people uh, who've actually had to command major forces um, about what the warrior ethos is, and they have to keep keep their mouths shut and pretend like this is the civilian leadership that they all learned as part of a real ethos to respect. And so yeah, I feel for all of them. I think um a travesty and comedy of our current era that a group of people like that have to sit there and listen to pardon me, a cloud drunkard blowhard like that, and pretend that they are, um, and pretend that that this is something that they, that is, uh, that this is their leadership. And I mean, it is their leadership, but that's the sad part of it. And, this is a proud culture, and it is a culture that genuinely cultivates independent thinking. It's a culture that genuinely cultivates a lot of good virtues. And we got to keep them. There we go. And you know, subjecting them to this kind of beclowning is a very sad thing. And it has terrible implications for the subject we are right now going to turn to with Minna, who has just shown up, thus answering the question of whether the karmic retaliation against me for standing up my guest a few weeks ago was going to come at the hands of Minna. Hello,
Just
Minna
one quick,
Ålander.
just one quick thing as
Hi,
a
sorry for the I think is it echoing now? Probably, right? Yeah, sorry for the delay. This is
No
a very
worries.
chaotic week.
I
But
just
yes,
When you're
wanted to
it
say
talking
a
about
real quick.
Hexet's speech,
it is echoing, so please keep yourself muted when you're not talking. I will come back in just a second. Carol, you were going to say something before you vanish.
Yeah, just real quick. We're awfully lucky that neither Putin nor China decided they wanted to take the opportunity of all those guys being in Washington to, try something a little further than they had done before. Anyway, bye.
Take care. Yes, Minna, we were talking about Hegseth's speech, which I am handicapped in talking about because did not watch it because I cannot stand to see such things. What did you think of it?
well, I definitely make a point of not watching any of these speeches. I think it's like there's better uses for my time. I understand that obviously for a lot of Americans it's pretty relevant to know what's happening, but I figured that I'll be able to read enough about it afterwards, and I mean, it did seem like most of all a huge waste of money to ship all these people to one place to then tell them basically to be more fit and what was the other thing, look sharper or something. So I don't know. It's of course sort of sad to see because obviously I can't imagine that this is exactly a morale boosting effect on the service members. So
Has there been a lot of coverage of it in European press, and what has the reaction to it been?
always like nobody in the US can even just like fart without it being reported about. It's well, there was a lot of speculation, of course, like beforehand. What is this going to be? What's the what's the point of this? What's Trump trying to do here? I think what's pretty concerning is, as I understand, that he was basically like, everybody who doesn't agree can go now and leave their like rank at the door. So I think sort of getting rid of generals that you don't like. We have some precedents for that in history, and it usually didn't go very well. So it is, of course, a question then also from a European perspective, especially if these are, I mean, obviously not all of the people there were necessarily like in Europe, they were all over the world, but you have some people who have been working with Europeans for very long, who are very committed to NATO, who are very committed generally to US alliances, and who don't necessarily agree with sort of the drawing down of American commitment and presence, and also the way that Trump handles allies. And if these people then leave the military because they simply find it impossible to sort of work there any longer because this like goes so against their like convictions and so on, that might of course then also at some point have some impact on what we see, let's say in Europe, but also what other allies see. I don't know, because obviously like what really matters is the political level, but at least so far there's been some pretty good military to military cooperation still ongoing with Americans, for example, in Europe, and that can then also have
Yes.
an end.
So let's talk about that. I mean, we've had a series of incidents involving Russian or mysterious Russian drones in various countries. We've talked about Poland, but that was followed by an additional set of incidents in Romania, one in Denmark. What do we know about what's going on with respect to these various drone incidents?
Well, the ones in Denmark, and there were, by the way, multiple. So it all started with multiple drone sightings around Copenhagen, the main airport, plus also in Oslo. But then there were multiple drone sightings also at, I think, in total 4 Danish airports over the next days. And what now is suspected to have been the case is, and this is the suspicion for like, this has been the suspicion for already a longer time, that these shadow fleet vessels or other sort of Russian civilian espionage vessels are not only useful for dragging their anchors, but also as potential sort of launch pads or platforms from where to operate drones in this fashion. So there have been a number of incidents that haven't on such a scale made the news, but there's been a lot of this kind of suspicious drones sighted in like close to not only airports but also critical infrastructure, let's say nuclear and other power plants or so. And there has been this suspicion that it is maybe like civilian and commercial ships that are those like launch pads for these drones, or they can be also maybe used for as a sort of command center for this kind of an operation for the drone operators or something. Because usually it's really hard to ascertain where the drones came from or to locate the source. And obviously that might be easier. It's also a little bit harder to penetrate close enough to the airport. Like if you're like on land, I mean, that's also of course possible, but especially in the case of the Nordic Baltic region where you have all the capitals like close to the seaside and so on. So it's sort of it can be it can work. So there was actually, by the way, a pretty good article on this on France 24. So I can send a link to the chat later. But as you all know, I can't speak and search on the internet at the same time. So that is one suspicion. And there were 3 different ships with links to Russia that were that were the main suspects here because they had moved in strange ways and had been within the relevant sort of like range from these airports to have potentially been the sources or like source of these drones. And I'm not sure whether this is confirmed or like was this just some rumor, but France may have now intercepted one of those ships after they sailed further down south. I would have to double check that though. So yeah, the problem is just that it's very hard to then like sort of with certainty like first find out that that it was that particular ship or vessel, and then also to prove that indeed was the case. So as always, it's this kind of a difficult thing, but it's also interesting in terms of this hybrid warfare, and especially in the maritime area, that is the strategy sort of shifting now, that anchor tracking maybe doesn't seem so expedient anymore because it hasn't had much of an effect. And also
And
because NATO has
for those who don't, anchor dragging is the tactic being used to cut undersea cables.
Yeah. Exactly. So we have had a number of incidents to like just in December and January this year, and also before that it all started like with in 2023. So we had a number of occasions where a ship had allegedly accidentally dragged an anchor and thereby damaged undersea cables, either data cables, or there was a gas pipeline once that got damaged between Finland and Estonia, and there's been a number of different types of cable, also energy cables and so on. So there's just like so many cables on the bottom of the Baltic Sea, so this is a very easy thing to do. But now that NATO has significantly increased its monitoring activity through this Baltic Sentry that was launched in January, and then there's something called the Task Force X that is like a new and sort of experimental way to use unmanned systems from the member states and to sort of experiment with unmanned systems to increase the NATO presence and monitoring, basically to make Russia know that they cannot lift a finger without NATO observing it. So now the big question is, have there not been further incidents because of this NATO activity, or because it was spring and summer and there was less sort of like plausible deniability because the weather was good and there weren't so many storms? So will these incidents resume again now in the fall and winter, when there's again more of this kind of veil of deniability because of bad weather? Or has this NATO monitoring been so effective that Russia is now shifting a little bit to this different thing?
Or perhaps they're shifting because they've shown that they can make trouble on the seafloor, and now it would be fun to make trouble in the air. You know, the shift itself could have several different explanations. So one of the aerial incidents, one of the more serious ones, involved Estonia, which, like the Poland oops situation, involves one of the flashpoint scenarios that we've talked about repeatedly on this show. What do we know about, and the Estonia incident appeared to involve an airspace violation that was for a protracted period of time. What do we know about that incident? I'm having trouble unmuting you. There you go.
There you go. Oh, okay. Sorry. Thanks. Maybe I unmuted myself at the same time and then I got muted again. Anyways, yeah, that was pretty remarkable because like, so there's two things about these issues, that none of these are exactly new. Like a lot of things have been happening before, but on a smaller scale. So somehow the intensity, the frequency, and the scale of these incidents is clearly like intensifying right now. And that points to some acceleration here. So, for example, airspace violations are a very common occurrence. Actually, in 2022, Finland had less airspace violations by Russian planes than usual because Russia was busy elsewhere. So this has been the situation in the region for a very long time. On the other hand, the usual airspace violations do not happen simultaneously by 3 different planes and for 12 minutes. So that's like really unusual. And it's like, I mean, I'm sorry, but there is no plausible deniability about that. So maybe you bust the airspace accidentally for like, I don't know, less than a minute or something. Okay. But 3 planes lingering for 12 minutes, that's not accidental. So that is very different. And I think actually I'm going to try to like get this into the last 15 minutes that we have, but because I unfortunately missed our overrated session due to travel, so I want to just bring in a topic that has to do with this that yeah.
Just so that you know, it's not 15 minutes, it's more like 10 because I have to end a little early.
Okay, cool, 10 minutes. So had I made it to the overrated session, I would have said that like shooting down Russian jets is overrated, and that is because the comparison has been the wrong one in the discussions. Namely, that Russia did it in 2015, and they sort of like were tough with Russia, and then Russia never violated their airspace again. Well, first of all, that's not true. Russia has violated Turkish airspace also after that incident. Second, it happened, I think, if I remember correctly, it was along the Syrian border. So it wasn't with like Turkey directly having a border with Russia and then shooting down a Russian plane there. And third, like Turkey's relations with Russia are like of a completely different nature than the relations between Russia and any of the countries around the Baltic Sea. So it's completely sort of it's a very bad and flawed comparison, because if Turkey does that and Erdogan and Putin are sort of chummy with each other, it's more like hitting your annoying buddy in the face. But then if Poland does that, like Poland is not exactly on chummy terms with Russia, so it will very likely be interpreted very differently by Russia. And then like we just like cannot assume that simply by shooting down a Russian plane that would be sufficient to make them stop, because there is no such sort of like clear-cut and automatic de-escalation dynamic from that. Actually, like if and when we have to do that, and I'm afraid that Russia may force us into doing that at some point if they continue with these like more and more audacious moves and maneuvers. But when we do that, we have to sort of also have the right sort of understanding of what it can lead to, and it can also totally it's thinkable that Russia will instead choose some kind of a tit-for-tat response instead of saying like, oh, well, okay, we will stop. So there is this risk that what if they then start claiming, like, let's say in Eastern Finland or like Estonia or wherever, where you have civilian airports as well, or like you do regular sort of your own fighter jets fly regularly, that they then claim that like at the first opportunity they shoot down one of ours and claim that it already either was in Russian airspace, even if it wasn't, or that it was like clearly headed towards Russian airspace. They would not have any scruples doing that to a civilian airplane either. So I think that there are some different risks related to this than in the Turkish case, for example. Plus,
I will just say on this that there's, you know, it is related to a matter we were talking about before you came on, which is the culture of machismo and the warrior ethos that Hegseth is lecturing a bunch of senior flag officers about, that, you know, managing conflict, managing hybrid conflict, this is not a business for people who like thumping their chests. And there are 100 ways to respond to a fighter jet incursion that may or may not be more effective than, for example, shooting it down. One might say, announce every time one of these incidents happens a new major weapons shipment to Ukraine, right? There's, you can defend your territory in ways that are more subtle than escalating a micro situation into a macro situation. The key point is you can't vacillate between, oh, just shoot down the aircraft and we don't give a shit about Estonia, right? Those are two poles, neither of which is necessarily the right, well, one of which is certainly the wrong reaction, and the other of which may in certain instances be the right reaction, but it's not one that you default to. We have Russian airspace violations in Alaska on a fairly frequent basis, and we don't shoot down those planes. And we shouldn't be lecturing European countries about doing it either. They have borders to manage. And the key thing is to have a unified, consistent NATO response.
Am I now audible? Yes. Okay, great. So actually, one of the things here, and why Russia probably did this in Estonian airspace and not in Finnish or Swedish, let's say, is that Estonia doesn't have its own air force. So I think that this discussion is like particularly unfair in the Estonian case, because Estonia cannot make that kind of decision nationally, because like Turkey essentially nationally decided to shoot down that Russian jet and didn't then like afterward involve all of NATO in it. So there are also different levels. So I think that it was probably like on purpose, because for the Baltic states, it's NATO air policing that secures their skies, and then it's immediately a different question, because if this was done, especially in the Baltic states airspace, it would immediately already involve all of NATO through that air policing, which is then again a different thing. And there's like a number of things that you can do before. So far, Russians have actually responded to the interceptions and escorting out. So they have let themselves be escorted out. If they at some point don't want to cooperate, you still have other options like shooting flares, flying so close that you can force an exit. I mean, like take contact and warn them, like there's a number of things. And of course, like shooting down a hostile airplane is also like it is an option in the rules of engagement of most countries, like also nationally. But it's for a good reason. There's a high threshold to doing that, and it's a very last resort. And I don't think that we should sort of like, because I think that Russia would love us to get provoked right now. I think that Trump was rambling about, before he said that NATO should shoot down these Russian jets, he had been rambling about an Estonianization of Europe, and that we have all become like way too belligerent and so on. I take it as a badge of honor, but anyways, so that's still like a little bit worrisome, because you could totally think that Russia has an interest in forcing a European country into going for it and shooting down a Russian jet. And then Trump says, like, Europeans are the aggressors here. We're not going to do anything. And this is now your problem. You caused this. You were aggressive, and we're not going to have anything to do with this. And that would be a way to sort of like force this all out sort of, break up in that sense.
Right, it's the total Trumpian bait and switch. You're not manly enough to just shoot down the planes, and then when you shoot down the planes, you're on your own. All right, I have to run because I have to go to this event that is down the hall. And Minna Ålander, you are a great Finn. I was about to say great American. By the way, guys, somebody at a restaurant I was going to the other day with Holly Berkeley Fletcher got us a very nice table, and I told her she was a great American, and she was so moved to be called a great American. It was the most delightful thing, and she asked me where it comes from, and I told her that, Trump once said that I was a bad American, and that ever since then I've been calling people great Americans. And she said, like, practically, it wasn't tearfully, but it was like very emotionally. That makes it even better. And so I am doubling down now on calling people great Americans or great Finns or great whatever nationality they may be, because for some people it seems to be very moving. So you are all great Americans, except those of you who are great Finns or great other people. I'm going to go to our Secured by Design launch event, which starts in 5 minutes. We are not going to be back tomorrow because it is Yom Kippur, and I will be renting my clothes and repenting for all my copious sins, including being zealots for bad causes, which you should also repent for. And not you, Minna, but you collectively, because we have all been zealots for bad cause. But we will be back on Friday, cleansed of sin, very hungry, and eager to hang out with whatever co-hosts and whichever ones of you may show up. Ta-ta.